There's a lot of work that goes into making a major motion picture like It Chapter 2. We saw lots of scary moments on the big screen, but it turns out there were some things that terrified the cast behind the scenes. Let's take a peek behind the proverbial curtain and talk about some of the craziness that happened on set. From which celebrity almost made a cameo to which scene Stephen King most wanted to see acted out. And if you thought what you saw of Pennywise was scary, there's a deleted scene which showcases one of his most powerful weapons. It Chapter 2 wasn't quite at an Avengers Endgame level of craziness, but there was a lot going on. There was a large cast of characters with essentially doubles if you consider the child version of each person. Then there's the ultra-powerful ancient evil being, and before you know it, you're struggling to cram anything else into the movie. But there was very nearly one more character, and we have to be honest, it's someone that we would have loved to see in the film. That person is none other than Oscar-winning director Guillermo del Toro. It turns out It Chapter 2 director Andy Muschietti is a big fan and had the perfect role in mind. Del Toro would have played the part of the janitor Ben Haskam encounters when he's running away from Pennywise. Of course, the scene would have been built up even more to one befitting of Del Toro's cinematic rank. But sadly, it didn't work out, and we bet you don't even remember who played the janitor in that scene. It was Martin Julian, who you obviously should have remembered from his role in the George of the Jungle television show. Not that we just looked that up on his IMDb page or anything. The events of It Chapter 2 take place 27 years after the first movie ended, and the losers have grown up quite a bit since then. But so have the kids who played them in the first movie, and that was a bit of a problem. Just think about what Finn Wolfhard looked like in the first movie compared to how he looked in Stranger Things Season 3. Pretty huge difference. Unfortunately, one of the problems of working with child actors is that they grow and change very quickly. So filming flashback scenes with totally different looking kids was a no-go. So the studio turned to some good old movie magic to digitally de-age the children of the Losers Club. It's not just some weird effect of being terrorized by a clown. Some kids, like Sophia Lillis, barely needed any alteration because they hadn't changed all that much, but Jack Dylan Grazer grew up so much they almost had to hire another kid to voice over his lines. Not only were their appearances altered, but their voices were changed too, in order for them to sound similar to how they did in the first movie. Being an actor looks glamorous when you see stars strolling on the red carpet. But behind the scenes, well, sometimes things get a little bit messy. Just ask Jessica Chastain, who ended up legitimately terrified while filming one particular scene in It Chapter 2. When the adult losers confront Pennywise, he goes all out by throwing their fears back in their faces. Beverly finds herself back in the bathroom stall, but this time it's filling up fast with a very unpleasant substance. According to Chastain, the studio used a record-breaking 4,500 gallons of the stuff. Oh, and don't think director Andy Muschietti was happy with a single take. She had to film the scene in multiple different ways and spent hours being doused in the stuff. Not only was this a gross, sticky, and freezing cold time, but it was also pretty scary. Chastain admits having the dark liquid obscuring her sight actually frightened her quite a bit. She worried that the cast and crew wouldn't be able to tell if something was wrong, and she needed help. It definitely did not help that her comparatively less sticky co-stars enjoyed laughing at her predicament. There are many reasons Bill Skarsgård was a great Pennywise, even if he's pretty much unrecognizable in his costume. Apparently, in addition to acting, he's also really skilled at contorting his face in ways that frighten people. It's actually a skill he spent years honing, as he used to torment his younger brother by plastering on the iconic Pennywise grin and chasing him around. We wonder if he used part of the proceeds from It Chapter 2 to pay his therapy bills. But let's not forget to give a virtual round of applause to the makeup and special effects team behind his Pennywise look. They really helped to ramp up his terrifying factor to the next level, and it turns out Skarsgård is still determined to frighten his siblings. After the Pennywise unit gave him a clown paint makeover, he would isolate himself in a tent on set to get into character. Sometimes he would even FaceTime his brothers while he was in full makeup. You know, just in case they were trying to enjoy their days or anything. Stephen King is a man who's proud of his work and has strong opinions on what the movie adaptation should look like. He famously hated Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, but he did say he enjoyed It Chapter 2, even if one of his absolute favorite scenes in the book wasn't included in the movie. Out of his 1,000-plus page novel, there were only 2 scenes he felt the movie had to have, and the good news is that he got one of them. Apparently, in addition to building imaginary worlds full of horrors, King also enjoys Paul Bunyan. Yeah, you know, the guy with a big blue ox and an axe. In the book, there's a scene where a giant Paul Bunyan statue comes to life and chases a young Richie, and that scene did end up making it into the movie. But the second scene he wanted would have been a little more complex. At the end of the film, the abandoned house is destroyed when it caves in. But in the book, way more of Derry gets destroyed. As Derry sinks into the ground and floods, a pipe starts rolling down a hill while a nearby observer comments, "That's Steven Spielberg." Even though it was a direct request from the author, director Andy Muschietti wanted to end the movie on a more emotional note, and he worried the special effects needed to pull that scene off would take up too much of the budget. There were a lot of things from the book that didn't make it into the movie, and that's true of pretty much every adaptation. But did you know that there's a deleted scene which didn't make it into the theatrical cut of the film? Andy Muschietti claims that in the world of It Chapter 2, belief acts as both a weapon and a form of defense. There was supposed to be a scene which highlighted this by showing Pennywise and Mike sitting down for a heart-to-heart. Or as much of a heart-to-heart as you can have between a human and an ancient horror. They would both go over their plans to destroy the other, and Mike would insist that the loser's belief would give them strength, while Pennywise felt confident that it's who they believed in. But according to Muschietti, the scene just didn't fit in with the overall pacing of the movie. It was deemed too irrelevant to the main plot and left out of the final product. While Muschietti insists he doesn't miss it, it's definitely a scene we wouldn't mind seeing. There was a lot going on in It Chapter 2, but there was also a ton left out. Even the members of the Losers Club didn't get as much time on camera as they would have if screenwriter Gary Duberman had his way. He points out that the novel starts out with a lot of information about the adult members of the Losers Club and what their lives are like. It goes back and forth between their current situations and what their lives were like as children in Derry. It takes half the book before all the grown-ups finally sit down for a nice dinner at a Chinese restaurant together. The movie definitively gave us a little taste of what each loser was up to as an adult, but it didn't really get into any of their stories. We only got a brief glimpse of Bill's wife, but in the book, Audra follows him to Derry to see what he's doing. You have to admit, it is kinda suspicious when your spouse mumbles something about fulfilling a childhood promise and then totally drops everything and disappears. What's scarier than Pennywise the Dancing Clown? How about a movie that just goes on for way too long? Especially when you got talked into supersizing your soda at the concession stand. That's one fear which was definitely plaguing writer Gary Dauberman. He was willing to sacrifice more of the adult losers' stories, but he still worried the movie would linger on too long and audiences would get bored. The final product ended up being 2 hours and 48 minutes long, which is way longer than the average horror film. To keep things in check, Dauberman moved forward with the motto of, if it feels long, then it is long. He reasoned that a well-paced, exciting movie often feels like it's shorter than a slow-moving, dull film. If you're watching this video in the dark, you might want to turn on all the lights in the house because we're going to talk about the hands-down scariest part of It Chapter 2. When the Adult Losers Club pushed for a final confrontation with Pennywise, Richie and Eddie find themselves face-to-face with some tough choices about which door to go through, not knowing what's lurking behind each one. When they open one of the doors, there's an adorable little Pomeranian sitting there behind the door labeled very scary. Well, fear is all relative. Maybe it's scary if you're allergic to dogs or something. While a Pomeranian might not strike fear into your heart, this scene provided a funny beat before things got scary again. Pennywise might not be real, but the reactions of the actors were in this scene. Instead of rehearsing ahead of time or having any direction, the two actors were allowed to improv what they did once they opened the door. While the scares were mostly fake on the set of It Chapter 2, some of the injuries were far too real. Bill Hader gave a great performance, but he managed to injure himself pretty badly too. He was running. Yep, just running along being chased by Pennywise. Hader says his co-stars were pulling off impressive moves while filming the movie's climax, but he barely got to take a few steps before doubling over in pain. Apparently, he pulled a muscle in a very sensitive area and had to get an MRI. What's the health insurance billing code for injuries sustained while running from a giant clown spider? Jessica Chastain also hurt herself doing something which should have been straightforward: standing up. She did so in a drain pipe and managed to smash her head against the top so hard she admits it made her shed a few tears. James McAvoy also didn't escape from the movie unscathed. Since he had to film the same strenuous scenes so many times, he ended up with a serious and painful case of tendinitis. And his suffering wasn't just physical, he was also tormented with nightmares about Pennywise, including one where the clown appeared beside him in bed and stroked his back. I wonder if he had trouble looking Bill Skarsgård in the eye after that one. We could never turn down a cameo of Guillermo del Toro. It can only make things better, right? Which one of these behind-the-scenes secrets was your favorite? Tell us your pick in the comment section below and then click on that subscribe button for more videos from us at CBR. Thanks for watching.